Alright guys, so we're going to talk about 12 minutes today. We'll get into it if you don't know what it is, but this video is either going to be split into a spoiler and non-spoiler, or it's going to be two completely separate videos, because I can't really review this game without going into spoilers, and I think if you're going to play it, you don't want spoilers, because that just ruins all the fun in a game like this. So, what is 12 minutes? So, it's a top-down kind of murder mystery detective game, right? I'm sure you've seen, all the trailers for it for at least 2-3 years at E3. They've been showing off. Essentially, you're stuck in an apartment. You go around, you interact with things, you find stuff out, and as you find stuff out, you progress the story more. Now, the whole premise of the game is that it loops. You're stuck in a time loop. This isn't a spoiler. It's in the trailer. And so essentially, when you get to a cutoff point, or you do something wrong to make the wife leave, or you kill yourself, it restarts, and you have to do it over and over until you get to the end of the story and break the time loop. Not getting into spoilers. And so what are the positives and negatives of this game? I want to keep the non-spoiler section kind of short. So the positives, obviously, in a game like this, is that the story is really strong, because that's the main focus. There's not really much there aside from the story. The gameplay pretty much consists of clicking on things and reading and listening, I guess. And that's pretty much all the gameplay is, right? So if you are going to be bored, just, if you don't like story stuff, if you skip all the cutscenes in a game, you're not going to like this game. Like you see here, what I'm doing, this is all of the gameplay. You click on stuff, and then read, and listen, and then click on some more stuff. So, just for the people that, don't like story type stuff, if you just want to run around and shoot people, and you thought maybe this was like a top-down action shooter type game, that's not what this is. It's heavily story-based. So back to those positives, like I said, the story's really good. If you're stupid like me, you're going to have no clue what's going on until the very end, and then you're just going to become even more lost, and we'll get to that when we get there. But, the negatives, the only negative I have, and again, if you like a lot of gameplay and stuff like that, that's obviously going to be a negative for you. But the only negative I have, I kind of have to use a spoiler for. I'll try to keep it as non-spoilerish as possible, but if you don't want to hear just the tiniest spoiler, then you might want to come back once you've at least gotten through a bit of the game. So, at one point in the game, you have to do something with a cup. That's as general as I can be without spoiling things. To do something with a cup. And so, that takes you a loop. That's what I'm calling it, when you fail and have to restart from the beginning. And basically, you're going to be doing that over and over again. It's not like you can just do everything in one loop and beat the game. You will have to play the same moment at least a few times, even if you know exactly what you're supposed to do. And so, you do something with a cup, and that's one loop. It's just learning that you have to do something with this cup. The second loop, and this isn't specific to the cup, this is just everything throughout the entire game, but I'm using this as an example. The second loop, when you're using this cup, let's say, you needed to pick it up, but the wife goes and gets it before you. Well, now in the next loop, you have to get to the cup before her. The next loop, you put the cup down too early, and, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do because you put it down too early. And so that's just, an example. When you do things in this game that take a couple of tries, obviously, I have no clue what I'm doing here in the beginning, but so if that frustrates you, I guess is what I'm trying to get to. If it's going to piss you off that you have to do things multiple times, then you're not going to enjoy this at all. You have to do everything at least twice, I would say, if not 3 or 4 times. So let's talk about the length of the game. If you go in having a printed out list or just a review or a walkthrough on your phone of exactly step by step what you're supposed to do, you can probably beat this in 2 to 3 hours, but you might as well just watch a video at that point. I don't know why you would play it, because it is all story. There's not much gameplay there. So, again, that way, probably beat it in 2 to 3 hours. The way it's meant to be played, that depends on how quickly you figure things out. I was walking around for at least a good 45 minutes stuck at a specific point. But I would say the 4 to 8 hour range is a safe bet. If you're really quick on these types of things, you're really good at puzzles, and you don't ever struggle on puzzles or get stuck or get lost when you're going around in games, then you'll be fine here. You'll get through this pretty quickly. You'll be able to find what you're looking for, put two and two together. Me, personally, it took me a long time. There were some steps where I was just completely lost. But that's just me. So depending on how quick you are at figuring things out, that'll definitely depend on how long you play the game, as well as the different endings if you want to get each ending. And that depends on what you count as endings. Now, none of this stuff here is spoilers, because this is what happens if you just play through the game. We'll try not to show spoiler stuff until we're there. So, this is technically what happens in your first loop, right? You just are learning information the first couple of loops. And so, realistically, this game can be very repetitive, and I want to get that out of the way. I mean, you will be listening, and it's worse the further and further you get to these long, repetitive, word-for-word dialogue loops over and over. Now, like I said, if you're quick to it, you only have to listen to it once or twice. But if you're like me, and you struggle, you're listening to this thing like 10 plus times, you're going to be able to quote it word for word. But, that's really all I can talk about without spoiling it, because, again, it's largely a story game. And so if I had to rate this out of 10 non-spoilers, I'd give it like a 7 or an 8. I mean, like I said, there's not a lot of gameplay. I want to put it at an 8. We're putting it at an 8. But the story's really strong. I didn't really see it coming. The only reason I knock it down a bit is just because I struggled a lot, and maybe this is just a me thing. That's one. Two, I was completely lost at the end, and I can't talk about that unless we go into spoilers. But once you get to the point where the story just starts moving, I guess we'll go into the third problem, because that's the third problem, is the pacing, right? The story steadily moves along throughout the game as you're figuring stuff out. You found, this chip underneath the dresser. That's not a thing, but, that progresses you to unlock this new piece of information that you learn. And now with that new piece of information, you do something different in your next loop, which leads you to the next clue, which leads you to do something different in your next loop, blah, blah, blah. That's how the whole game progresses, right? Then you get to this one point, whatever you want to call it, not spoiling it, and the game just takes the brakes off and just dumps everything on you in like 30 minutes. And so there's no possibility to mess up here in this dumping point, is what we're going to call it. You can't, fail and have to restart the day. So that's the speed at which it just dumps information on you. And I don't know if that's intentional, so that you feel just overwhelmed like the character is supposed to feel, but it's just, they just throw it all at you. But aside from those three things, I really like the game, right? It's not obnoxious to the point where the area is huge and you're searching around everywhere, and you got to look in little tiny cracks all over the place. The apartment's small enough to where within 2 or 3 loops you can pretty much find everything you're going to need to find, but it's how you get that and how it's important, right? For example, you see the present in my inventory up there. The present, just off the top of my head, not counting or actually thinking about it, the present can be used in at least 3 different ways, right? And depending on what you want to count as an ending, there's so many different endings, right? I'm going to get into a little bit of spoilers. At some point, you get a gun, all right? You can shoot yourself in the head, and technically, you can count that as an ending, right? But if you want to talk about you've beaten the game, you've done every dialogue option, there's 3 endings. The good one, the bad one, and then we'll just call the other one the middle one, because I don't really know if it's good or bad. That's really up to you to decide. And so, thankfully, with these types of games, like, what's that other, the Series X, the Medium, that game. It's top down, it's this type of style of game. It's not the same, story-driven plot or anything like that, but it's the same camera angle, the same gameplay style, right? Was not a fan of that because you're consistently moving between new rooms and new areas, and that's just overwhelming, right? Top down, that doesn't do it for me. Here, the top-down camera works really well because it's such a small area. If this was third person, this would be impossible because the camera would be inside the wall the entire time, or it would be so close to the character, all you would see would be the back of his head. And then first person, I guess technically you could have gone with first person, but this view was just more creative and more interesting, in my opinion. Now, as for the game itself and the pricing, is it worth it, all of that stuff, again, it depends, that 4 to 8 hour range. If you're doing it really quick, speed run type thing, 3-ish hour range. And so that's also something I want to touch on really quickly is with the time resetting every 12 minutes, the name of the game, it kind of forces you to do things quickly, and it doesn't, let you get stuck anywhere for too long. So that's also another positive that I just wanted to leave in at the end. And so looking at the price point, because if you're a sane person, you'd play this on Game Pass for $3.99. And so that doesn't really matter about the length of the game, because if you want to look at it, technically you're paying $5 for it, right? Or if you already have it, it's free. But it's $25 on Steam, or if you don't use Game Pass, and I think that's a bit much for just the amount of time and what's there. I think $15 is probably a good price point, but that's just me. That's just my opinion. You guys let me know what you think of the game down in the comments below, and I'll see you guys on the next one.